In this module, we are going to discuss how to configure the adaptive threat protection. The module goals for what we're going to learn in this module is first we're going to learn how to identify the purpose of the adaptive threat protection module. Then we're going to learn how do you deploy the adaptive threat protection and how to identify the different policies that are available for the adaptive threat protection as well as their default settings. And then we'll see how we can configure the adaptive threat protection policies to meet our customer requirements. This product is an optional module for context-aware adaptive security. As a standalone module, this provides dynamic application containment (DAC) policies. These policies will protect our systems by limiting the actions that are contained in applications that can perform based on configured rules. As an integrated solution, the adaptive threat protection provides a security ecosystem that allows instant communication between systems and devices in your environment. This communication is made possible with our McAfee Data Exchange Layer, the DXL framework. In addition, if you have the McAfee Threat Intelligence Exchange, TIE servers, and databases managed by our different EPO systems, you can combine them to share reputation information. Just note, this adaptive threat protection is not supported on McAfee Policy Orchestrator cloud-based systems. The adaptive threat protection is an optional module added to an existing ENS deployment. It adds the ability to block, contain, or clean files based on file reputation and thresholds, policies, and rules. In EPO on-premise environments, adaptive threat protection is managed primarily using the policy catalog. For standalone systems, use the Endpoint Security Client. It is not supported on any systems managed by McAfee EPO Cloud. The Dynamic Application Containment enables you to specify what applications with specific reputations run in a container. Based on the reputation threshold, adaptive threat protection requests that the Dynamic Application Containment run the application in a container. Contained applications are not allowed to perform certain actions as specified by containment rules. This technology lets you evaluate unknown and potentially unsafe applications by allowing them to run in your environment while limiting the actions they can't take, without a requirement of virtual machines or a sandbox. RealProtect scanning perform automated reputation analysis in the cloud and on the systems. When integrated with the McAfee Active Response, MAR, and our McAfee Advanced Threat Defense, the ATD, DXL, and TIE, additional threat intelligence sources and functionality is offered. These products are not included with ENS. They are acquired and deployed separately. How does it work? We have a layered approach. First off, if the process is signed by a trusted certificate, the signed certificate is cached and remains in the cache after the system reboots. The scanner is less likely to scan files accessed by processes that are signed by a cached trusted certificate, resulting in a scan avoidance and improved performance. Scans run much faster by whitelisting all files previously scanned and deemed safe, requiring only a limited set of untrusted files events to be scanned. For instance, if a Microsoft installer is trusted, all files dropped by that installer are trusted. However, if an installer has not yet been scanned or is suspicious, a full set of its events is scanned. The content files, including the AM core content, also called malware signatures and exploit prevention content, works with the scanning engine to identify and handle the threats. The McAfee AM core quickly detects known threats by utilizing cloud lookups for known blacklisted and whitelisted files, while using the traditional generics and heuristics to classify each. When relying on behavioral patterns, false detections can occur. So the McAfee AM core helps prevent the false positives by performing local checks for files signed against a list of trusted publishers, and McAfee GTI reputation checks against the file hashes. The McAfee Global Threat Intelligence the heuristic network check for suspicious files, looks for the suspicious programs and DLLs running on your client systems that the threat prevention protects. When a detection occurs, the software sends a request containing a fingerprint of the suspicious file to a central database server hosted by McAfee Labs. The dynamic application containment protects by containing unknown applications and preventing them from performing malicious behavior. The unknown application is able to run, but it will be limited as to what actions can be performed. The Real Protect can also go beyond static analysis by performing a dynamic behavior analysis to detect the malware that attempts to hide in the file system, but performs malicious actions as a process. Analysis happens on the endpoint and compares it in the cloud to seize with it a wealth of threat behaviors to reach a conclusion. Convicted as malicious, Real Protect will then take an action to remediate the threat, learning from the behaviors as it has witnessed. Some use cases for how adaptive threat protection can help is, first, one, I can immediately block a file. So adaptive threat protection alerts the network administrator of an unknown file in the environment. And instead of sending the file to McAfee for analysis, the administrator blocks the file immediately. The administrator can then use the TIE server, if available, to learn how many systems ran the file and the advanced threat defense to determine whether the file is a threat. The next is where we have allow the custom file to run. So let's say a company routinely uses a file whose default reputation is suspicious or malicious. For example, a custom file created for the company. Because this file is allowed, instead of sending the file information to McAfee and receiving an updated DAT file, the administrator can change the file's reputation to trusted and allow it to run without prompts or warning. Lastly, we can say run the file in a container. When the company first uses a file whose reputation is not known, the administrator can specify to allow it to run in a container. In this case, the administrator configures the containment rules in the dynamic application containment settings. The containment rules define which actions the contained application is prevented from performing. How does adaptive threat protection attain the reputation? Well, it depends on the architecture. If you do not have TIE and DXL, then if it's connected to the internet, we will talk to McAfee GTI. If it's not connected to the internet, then it's going to have to use the local system. Okay? If TIE and DXL is present, then what we can do is we'll use the adaptive threat protection in the TIE server to communicate the reputation information to everyone else. The DXL passes the information to all the managed endpoints and shares the information with other McAfee products accessing the DXL framework. A good example would be the McAfee Network Security Platform. So, the adaptive threat protection with TIE server enables you to control the file reputation at a local level in your environment. You decide which files can run and which files are blocked, and DXL will share the information immediately throughout your environment. The architecture of TIE and DXL is not present is the fact that the adaptive threat protection communicates with the McAfee GTI for the file reputation information. Based on the activity from millions of sensors worldwide and an extensive research team, the McAfee Labs publishes timely, relevant threat activity via the McAfee GTI. This is always-on, cloud-based threat intelligence service that enables accurate information protection against known and fast-emerging threats by providing the threat determination and contextual reputation metrics. McAfee GTI integrates directly with our security products and instantly protects against emergency threats to reduce operational efforts and time between detection and containment. The thing is what I want to point out to you is if you'll notice each one of these endpoints alone talks to the McAfee GTI. They do not share any information with each other, they just upload the events to the EPO server. But the different cloud-based reputation services that the GTI gives us is file reputation, web categorization, message reputation, network connection reputation, and certificate reputation. The optional architecture, where you do have tie and DXL present, what happens is the adaptive threat protection and the tie server communicate the file reputation information. This enables you to control the file reputation at a local level in your environment. You decide which files can run and which are blocked. The DXL shares the information immediately throughout your environment. The DXL fabric enables bidirectional communication between the adaptive threat protection module on the managed system and the tie server. It also shares information with the other McAfee products that access the data exchange layer, such as the McAfee Enterprise Security Manager and the McAfee Network Security Platform. This also makes sure that all it takes is for one machine to upload that particular information to your tie server, and then you have the determination determined, and then all of your endpoint systems are aware about that particular file and can be blocked immediately. The key components of the dynamic application containment is the fact that the reputation threshold is what we use to determine when the containment is triggered, and you can specify that reputation threshold. Then you configure the containment rules that will block log or block in log the actions that the contained applications can perform it. And then you can also globally exclude applications from being contained, such as a known application or an application that is trusted. Just realize if you use EPO for your centralized management, all the changes made using the ENS client interface may be overwritten by your ENS policies when they're enforced. Examples where the running process is contained is, for example, you have the DAC threshold in your options policy changes from might be malicious to unknown. Or the tie file reputation will override the changes of the reputation of the running processes from unknown to might be malicious. The Real Protect combines pre-execution static analysis and post-execution behavioral analysis to stop more malware than any signature-based or static-only solution. It applies a state-of-the-art machine learning techniques to identify malicious code based on both an in-depth assessment of its static features, the pre-execution analysis, and what it actually does, the dynamic behavioral analysis, all without signatures. The signature-less classification is performed in the cloud and therefore maintains a small client footprint while providing near real-time detection. It provides insights into behaviors that have been deemed malicious and the classification of threats. These insights can be particularly helpful in uncovering how file-based malware attempts to evade detection through techniques such as hacking, encryption, or misusing legitimate applications. The Real Protect includes two scanning options, which are enabled by default: the cloud-based Real Protect and the client-based Real Protect. The options are managed within the Adaptive Threat Protection Options policy. The Real Protect static analysis happens as follows. I have a scenario where the system has internet access. The Real Protect checks the file attributes against the local Real Protect static model on the endpoint. If the local model does not detect a file, Real Protect queries the Real Protect cloud to determine if the static model has an updated detection. The static query sends the static attributes about the file over HTTPS, and if the file is detected in step 1 or 2, ENS performs a GTI query with the hash of the sample over the representational state transfer, REST. This is a safety check to prevent false positives by querying the McAfee GTI whitelist. In a tie environment, ENS performs the safety check against this tie server before the detection is triggered. Scenario 2, where the system has no internet access, the Real Protect checks the file attributes against the local Real Protect static model on the endpoint. If a file is detected, ENS attempts a McAfee GTI query over REST. Because the safety check fails, ENS does not detect the file. However, in a tie environment, the detection occurs. The real protect dynamic analysis does require internet access because it does query the cloud. The local machine is not used in the real protect dynamic analysis. In this slide, we have an example of how the dynamic application containment in the real protect works. This feature contains a list of running processes when the policy change occurs or when the process reputation changes. So first, the endpoint receives the malware. Second, reputation business object provides a reputation score. Then based on the score, ENS calls for a dynamic application containment. The endpoint detections performed on behavior, access violations, memory scanning, safely, and so on. Then the real protect sends the comparison results to the endpoint to be acted upon, and if it's dirty, it will report that it is dirty. If it's clean, then it allows the object to run again. This slide shows you a high level of deploying the adaptive threat protection. First, you obtain the adaptive threat protection extension and package. You add this to the EPO server. Then you deploy the adaptive threat protection package to the endpoints. You configure your adaptive threat protection policies. You monitor and tune the policies. And then you can integrate the McAfee DXL or tie. Adaptive threat protection includes two policy categories. You have the options policy that has to do with the adaptive threat protection setting and dynamic application containment, the settings that are specific to DAC. To configure the policies, you access the policy catalog. Just note, with ENS 10.5 and later, the ENS includes a McAfee default balanced and a McAfee default security dynamic application containment policy. These policies provide higher security than the default report-only policies that we had before. In the McAfee default balanced dynamic application containment policy, some critical containment rules are set to block and report. It is intended as a slightly higher security alternative to the default report-only policy. In contrast, in the McAfee default security dynamic application containment policy, a large number of the DAC rules are set to block and report. It is intended as a higher security best practice to the default report only in the balanced policies. Configuring the options policy for the adaptive threat protection. Make sure the adaptive threat protection first is enabled. All the other options apply only if tie is integrated. The features are the allow the threat intelligence exchange server to collect the anonymous diagnostic and usage data, use the McAfee GTI file reputation if the threat intelligence server is not reachable, which is able by default, and it integrates with all of our products, and then prevent users from changing settings. That would be where you have the threat intelligence exchange server. In configuring the options policy for the real protect scanning, these two options are selected by default. You have enabled client-based scanning and you have enabled cloud-based scanning. Do realize that that does require internet connectivity. Always remember, the client-based scanning will send any telemetry information to the cloud, but it does not use the cloud for analysis. The client-based scanning collects and sends file attributes and behavioral information to the cloud for analysis. If you are in a tie environment, the safety check will be performed against the tie server before the detection is triggered. The both options that we have selected here, you do have to have connectivity to the McAfee GTI, but that could change with future releases. For the rule assignment, there are 3 rule group options. Each option has an associated security level. The balance, which is the default, this level is intended for typical business systems where new programs and changes are installed infrequently. It uses more rules with the policies. Users will experience more blocking and prompting with this selected. Productivity, this level is intended for systems that change frequently often installing and uninstalling trusted programs and receiving frequent updates. Examples of these systems are computers used in a developmental environment. Fewer rules are used with policies for this setting. Users see minimum blocking and prompting when the new files are detected. The security level. This level is intended for IT managed systems with tight control and little change. For example, systems that access critical or sensitive information in a financial or government environment. This setting is also used for servers. The maximum number of rules are used with the policies for this setting. Users experience even more blocking and prompting if you select this option. For the action enforcement, the options that you have are that you can enable the observe mode. You will have a lot of events that will be generated, but nothing will be blocked. The policy will not be enforced. It is recommended that you enable this temporarily on just a few systems, only while you're trying to tune your adaptive threat protection. Because enabling this mode causes the adaptive threat protection to generate events but not enforce any actions, so your systems might be vulnerable to threats. You can select the reputation threshold for the following actions: dynamic application containment, block, and clean. The options are: is it unknown, where is the default for the balanced rule group; might be malicious, which is the default for the productivity rule group; most likely malicious, known malicious, and might be trusted, which is the default for the security rule group. Configuring the options policy where we have the threat detection user messaging, the default for this is that it is disabled. You can have it where it displays the threat notifications to the user, where you can notify them when the threat reputation threshold reaches a certain level. But just understand your selection cannot conflict with the clean or block settings. For example, if you block unknown files, you cannot set this field to might be trusted because the threshold is higher than unknown. You can go with the default action as to whether a block if the user fails to respond to a prompt. Specify the time in minutes of your timeout, how many minutes, 1 to 5, to display the prompt before taking the default action. The default is 5 minutes. And the message. Define the message that the user will see when a file that meets the prompting criteria tries to run. And then also disable the threat notifications if the threat intelligence service is not reachable. It will not display anything if the TIE server is unreachable. The Advanced Threat Defense feature. This feature only applies if you have ENS integrated with ATD and TIE. The first option is send the files not yet verified to the McAfee Advanced Threat Defense for analysis. When enabled, Adaptive Threat Protection sends the files securely over HTTPS using port 443 to the Advanced Threat Defense when the TIE server does not have ATD information about the file is at or below the specified reputation limit, the file is at or below the specified file size limit. Note: you need to be sure to specify the information for the ATD in the management policy for the TIE server. The option of submit files when reputation threshold reaches, you specify the threshold. The options are most likely trusted, unknown, which is the default, and most likely malicious. And then limit the size, it's in meg, limit the size of the files sent, and it's anywhere from 1 to 10 meg. The default is 5 meg. To configure the containment rules, this applies to Windows only. You select the button for the Show Advance, and then you can see the containment rules. If a full impact of a rule is not known, be sure to select Report Only so that you'll receive a warning without it actually blocking it. Monitor your logs and check these reports to assess if the blocking is actually needed. The McAfee defined containment rules automatically are set to block or log actions that contained applications can actually perform. You can change the block and report settings, but you cannot otherwise change or delete these rules. You can create an exclusion so that an executable can be excluded from the dynamic application containment. The processes in the exclusions list will run normally and will not be contained. You have to type a name, it is required, and specify either the file name or path, the MD5 hash, or the signer. If you select the signer, you have to have the Allow Any Signature and Sign By options configured for that particular selection. The guidelines for the exclusions are, first off, you must specify at least one identifier. It's file name or path, MD5 hash, or signer. If you specify more than one identifier, all identifiers apply. If you specify more than one identifier and they do not match, for example, the file name and the MD5 hash do not apply to the same file, the exclusion or inclusion is invalid. The exclusions and inclusions are case sensitive, and wildcards are allowed for all of the features except for the MD5 hash. Managing the policy assignment, always remember that you can assign your policies within the system tree. Check your understanding, multiple choice. Choose the correct answers. Which features are provided by the ATP module? Choose 3. Is it A, tie reputation checks for files? B, GTI network reputation blocking? C, dynamic application containment? D, real protect malware scanning? And E, scheduled heuristic full disk scan. If you selected A, C, and D, you are correct. Check your understanding, true or false. The DAC feature requires prior integration with the McAfee, DXL, and tie. Is this true or false? It is false. It does not require integration, but it really works very well, and it is highly recommended that you do integrate it with the DXL and tie. In review, the key points that we want you to remember is the adaptive threat protection works with or without integration of the McAfee DXL and tie through the use of dynamic application containment. The DAC allows evaluation of unknown and potentially unsafe applications without sandbox or virtual machines. The DAC prevents applications from making changes on endpoint while allowing endpoint detection analysis. The key components of the DAC feature are reputation threshold, containment rules, and exclusions.